Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd Family part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. It is a Sunday afternoon here on the East Coast, so it's time to talk some college football wrap up for week number 8. I wanted to do this last night, but all the late games were intriguing. So I was going to finish those late games and then do the video. And then I had a hard couple of days. So I fell asleep and did not do it. Then I woke up and thought, it's too late to do it now. Hey, Austin, glad to have you here, brother. So now we're going to talk some college football wrap up. And I know the AP poll is already out. If you have any thoughts on that, feel free to leave them down below in the comments section. But I'm going to do another separate video where I'm going to discuss the AP poll. But while you're here, make sure you leave your comments. Make sure you give the video a like and a thumbs up. And subscribe if you have not yet subscribed. I love interacting with people. But let's go back to the Thursday night game, which on paper looked like it was going to be a close game. Ended up not being a close game. The Boston College Eagles got far behind, tried to get back into it. Looked like they had the momentum, but the Hokies stopped it and went on to win the game 42-21. Friday night, Duke defeated Florida State 23-16. I talked to a Florida State fan yesterday, and she's been talking all year long about how bad they are, but she was convinced that the problem was DJ, and I kept telling her the same thing I've said on here numerous times. DJ is not the problem. Is DJ great? No. But is DJ your best option? Yes. But that's all DJ does is quarterback. Florida State can't run the ball. Their offensive line can't block. Their defense can't tackle. The only good thing they have is a punter. And when your punter's your best player, you're in trouble. But now that DJ is hurt and Florida State still sucks, she realizes, okay, well, DJ was not the problem. He may not win you a game, but he's not going to lose you a game. People forget. Hi, Bluey. Glad to have you here. People forget that the first game of the year against Georgia Tech, Florida State was behind, and DJ took them down the field and was able to score and tie the game up. But Georgia Tech came right back and kicked the field goal and won the game. Hey, Bluey, you live in New Zealand. Well, glad to have you here all the way from New Zealand. Tell all your friends and family in New Zealand about the channel. Hello, Sanu. Glad to have you here from India. Thank y'all for watching from New Zealand and India. We're discussing some college football, but even if you're not a college football fan, I'm glad to have you here. Draco, glad to have you here as well. But Florida State's in for a long season. Right before they play Florida to end out the season, they play, I forget who it is, but it's some either low Power 4 team or a low Group of 5 team, but it's a team that's no good. So Florida State will win that game, but there's a good chance they might go 2-10. It's sunny in New Zealand, but that's good to hear. It's also sunny here on the East Coast where I am. It's just no longer sunny in 95. Now it's about sunny and I say 75. I can live with that all day long. I'm good between 60 and about 80. When you're somewhere along in there, you don't have to wear long sleeves. You don't need a jacket. You ain't got to put on extra clothes, but you ain't got to take off clothes. You don't need no sweater. You don't need no pullover. You ain't got to wear shorts. You can wear a hat and the wind won't blow it off. To me, between 60 and 80 is perfect weather. No, Bluey, I do not have any pets. Your dog, Duke the Boxer, passed away. I hate to hear that. Sanu, I am in Georgia. And if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, I apologize. It looks like Sanu to me. But I live in Georgia. That is where I am located on the East Coast. Georgia Southern defeated James Madison 24-14. Georgia Southern continues to get a little bit better all the time. Duke is a good name for a animal. I certainly agree with that. Baylor defeated Texas Tech 59-35. Colorado all over Arizona 34-7. I'm not quite sure what happened to Arizona. Hi, Georgia Ball. Glad to have you here. Hey, Juma. Glad to have you here. But Arizona's quarterback and Arizona's offense was good last year, but this year they just look pitiful. But Colorado might be the second best team in the Big 12 right now. Maryland defeated USC 29-28. Hey, Juma, glad to have you here. And USC has now had a lead, I believe, in 4 straight games in the fourth quarter and lost them all. And the longer the season goes, the worse that loss looks for LSU because USC started out pretty good, so it looked like a decent loss for LSU, but now it looks like a bad loss. Hey, Snort, glad to have you here. Actually, Snort, to be honest with you, I just now seen your question. I'm sorry, but I don't know that I have a favorite car brand. I'm actually not a materialistic person at all. I never have been. I've always driven a Ford, so I guess from the outside it looks like, hey, he's a Ford man, but it's not intentional. It's just I go to a dealership because I need a car, and the best deal they always have at the time I go is on a Ford. So I get one. So I guess it looks like I'm a Ford fan, but really, truly, as long as I get a car that runs, I'm not picky. I don't care about windows. I don't care about air. I don't care about color. I just want something that gets me from point A to point B. And if it does, I don't give a darn if it's a Datsun, a Toyota, a Ford, a Chevrolet. I don't care. Hey, Manic, you like Ferraris. Toledo defeated Northern Illinois by the score of 13-6. Toledo is actually a pretty good football team. Bluey, you subscribed. Thank you so much for subscribing to the channel. My family and I greatly appreciate it. Kansas all over Houston, 42-14. That's a game that on paper looked like it was going to be an awful game, which it was. But I thought it was going to be lower score than that because for some reason Kansas has had a problem all year long scoring. But their offense actually showed up in that game, but that's probably because Houston is terrible. NC State finally gets back on the winning side by defeating California 24-23. South Carolina all over Oklahoma 35-9. And if you see that score, you think, oh, the Gamecocks had a good offense. Not really. Almost half of their points came from their defense. The South Carolina defense scored more points than the Oklahoma offense did. Oklahoma's offense right now is absolutely disgusting. I mean, if you all of a sudden can't sleep and you're thinking, man, I just cannot go to sleep, watch the Oklahoma offense. It'll put you to sleep. I mean, it is awfully, dreadfully, embarrassingly bad. They had benched their starting quarterback to start the season, but they went back to him in the game yesterday because they can't move the ball. They couldn't score right now on the field by themselves against air. I mean, I have never seen a collegiate team be as bad as they are on offense. I can't believe you can intentionally try and be that bad. Their offense is absolutely embarrassing. And if it doesn't get better, you're going to see Brent Venables on the hot seat. Not saying it's justified. Not saying he should be. But it's Oklahoma. And they're not going to put up with 5-7, 6-6 years. And this is his third year there. And they're not getting better. Cincinnati defeated Arizona State 24-14. Your sister lives in the UK. Well, Bluey, tell her about the channel as well. See if she'll like it and subscribe to it. We would greatly appreciate that. Wake Forest rebounds from their big loss to Clemson last week by defeating UConn 23-20. UCLA defeated Rutgers 35-32. Rutgers started out pretty good, but they've gotten worse the last couple of weeks. Wisconsin continues to look good with a backup quarterback. They defeat Northwestern, who is pretty bad, 23-3. Navy continues to win. They defeat Charlotte 51-17. Illinois defeats Michigan 21-7. Michigan actually played their third string quarterback in that game because they just cannot move the football. Thank you, Bluey. I'd appreciate that. And I talked about Oklahoma's offense being bad. Well, Michigan might be almost as bad. Michigan can at least run the ball. They just can't throw. Oklahoma can't block. They can't run. They can't throw. If Oklahoma and Michigan played a game right now, the over-under should be 12 because that's two teams that just cannot score at all. Missouri had to come from behind to defeat Auburn 21-17. Indiana all over Nebraska 56-7. And I was talking to somebody before SWA last night. We were talking about Nebraska, and he was talking about Dylan Raiola. And I told him that, Dylan Raiola, to me, he looks slow. He looks fat. He looks out of shape. But he's not bad. He's definitely the best quarterback Nebraska's had in probably a decade, but he's not a five-star quarterback. But he's all Nebraska has. I mean, they have no receivers. They have no running game. It's all Dylan Raiola. So he is not bad, but he's not great. But we really won't know how good he can be until he gets some kind of help around him because right now he doesn't have that. But Indiana now is undefeated, and I don't think anybody saw this coming, but you've got to give their coach credit because it's his first year there, but he's won everywhere he's been. But at his introductory press conference during basketball season, he was there, and the fans cheered, and he pretty much come out and said, hey, cheer like that when we beat Ohio State. Cheer like that when we beat Penn State. Don't cheer now. Come back and cheer during football season. So the man's confident, but you can't blame him because he's won everywhere he's been. Hey, Eric, glad to have you here, man. Looking good since that Georgia loss. Yeah, you're right about that. And your Vols, I'm going to talk about them here in a couple of minutes. I'm doing the early games, but I'm slowly getting to the afternoon and the night games. So we'll talk about your Vols here in a couple of minutes, Eric. Glad you're here, man. Haven't seen you comment in a while on the channel, so I'm glad you tuned in on this Sunday afternoon. But Texas A&M defeat Mississippi State 34-24. And Eric just talked about Clemson looking good since their loss to Georgia. But A&M's another team that, had that bad loss opening weekend to Notre Dame. And they have looked really good ever since then. You're close to Australia. You got a sister in Australia. You got family all over, Bluey. I do too, but of course mine are here in the States. But A&M is slowly getting better. I think they're finally coming around to the kind of coach that Mike Elko is. He is completely different as a coach than what Jimbo Fisher was. And A&M is slowly getting better. Mike Elko is a phenomenal coach. If he can get talent at A&M, they will finally be the team that they've been hyped up to be the last 25 years that they haven't been. And Notre Dame, speaking of the Fighting Irish, they defeat Georgia Tech 31-13. Clemson defeated Virginia 48-31, and the score wasn't that high of score until late in the game. About 7 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, Clemson was up 41-17, and the game was pretty much over with, but they put in all their backups on defense. You're a kicker for your high school football team. Well, I'm glad to hear that, Snort69, but glad you're here tuned in to the channel. It was 41-17 Clemson, and then Virginia scored, went for two, and they got it and made it 41-25. And then they did an onside kick. Clemson recovered it. They scored, made it 48-25. Well, Clemson kicked off. Virginia scored again and made it 48-31. But the game was pretty much in hand when the fourth quarter started. But Clemson wins 48-31. Hey, buddy, I'll be done in a few minutes, okay? I'm talking to one of my twins. One of my twins is gone with my wife. I still have one here with me. I told him I was going to do a video. He said, that's fine, Daddy. Jimbo Fisher couldn't ever coach his way out of a wet paper bag. And I agree with that, Eric. And I've said many a times here on the channel, I never understood the Jimbo Fisher love. Jimbo Fisher at one time, before he became the head coach at Florida State, was the offensive coordinator at LSU probably 15, 20 years ago. And I wasn't impressed with him then. And at that time, he was supposed to be the supposed coach in waiting at LSU. And I thought, why? He sucks. Why is this man a coach in waiting? He's done nothing to deserve the job. And then Florida State hired him, and he started out really good, but he had Jameis Winston. And Jameis Winston, despite what he does in press conferences and despite what he does off the field, on the field collegiately, he was great. So it was easy to win with Jameis Winston. But outside of Jameis Winston, he got worse and worse and worse every year at Florida State. So Texas A&M had no business hiring him, and they sure had no business hiring him with the contract he got right away for doing nothing. So you can't feel bad for them because, to me, he had no business getting that contract. But it's A&M's fault for offering him that when he did nothing to warrant that contract. But they gave it to him anyway, so of course he's going to take it. What coach is going to say, nah, I'm not worth that. You can keep it. Any coach in America, any person in America would take it. But Jimbo Fisher, to me, never deserved all the hype and all the praise he got. He was supposed to be a good offensive mind. His offenses always looked slow. They looked unmotivated. They looked confused. They looked lost. I never got the Jimbo Fisher love, and I've never understood the Mack Brown love. I've said probably 5,000 times here on the channel that to this day, I do not understand all the love Mack Brown gets. It makes zero sense to me. You're getting a new dog. It's going to be a German Shepherd named Stella. Well, that's awesome because I got a daughter named Bella, and Stella rhymes with Bella. So I'm glad to hear that, Bluey. But I've said numerous times here on the channel that if you look at Mack Brown's career record and the amount of wins he's got, he's coached for 9,475 years. And look at the man's record. He averages 8 wins a year. That's what he does. He had about a 5 or 6 year stretch at Texas when he had Colt McCoy and Vince Young, where he pretty much went undefeated or lost one game every year. But when you've got great players like Colt McCoy and Vince Young, you're going to win. But outside of those 5 or 6 years at Texas, Mack Brown has always been an average coach. That's what he is. And people still try to tell me, oh, Mack Brown's a great coach. No, he's not. Mack Brown sucks. And since the Tar Heels rehired him, they have not gotten any better. As a matter of fact, to me, they've gotten worse. They just won't run off Mack Brown because he's Mack Brown, which to me that means absolutely nothing. He's had 2 consecutive back-to-back NFL first-round draft pick quarterbacks. In this day and time, football is all about offense. He's had 2 consecutive NFL first-round draft pick quarterbacks, and he's won absolutely nothing. So you can't tell me Mack Brown is a good coach. I don't believe it. I'm sorry. And I've said the same thing about Jimbo Fisher. I never understood it. I'm sure eventually Jimbo's going to get hired by somebody, but I wouldn't hire the man. But Tennessee, who Eric is waiting to talk about, defeat Alabama 24-17. And, you know, I have said 3 or 4 times here on the channel doing college football videos that Alabama seems like they're slowly, progressively getting worse. And now all their fame, all their recognition, all their hype just comes from being Alabama because they're not on the field the same team they were 8, 9 years ago. They're just not. And Nick Saban, a lot of times is like Dabo Swinney, and Nick Saban says stuff and people don't listen. But Nick Saban came out 5 or 6 years ago talking about the whole, you know, transfer portal stuff and NIL stuff before it got started because we knew it was coming. And he pretty much, in a roundabout way, was saying that, hey, once this thing starts, we're not going to win because in Tuscaloosa, we don't have the pockets they have in Athens, Georgia. We don't have the pockets they have in Columbus, Ohio. We don't have the pockets they have in Oregon. And, now you're seeing that. And that might be a reason why Saban retired because Saban doesn't like to lose. And I think he knew, okay, we're no longer going to get the talent other teams get because we can't pay them what other teams can pay them. So I think Alabama's glory days are done. They're gone. I don't get North Carolina and Mac Brown either. Same as I didn't get Jimbo and A&M. They neither one were good coaches. They're about the same to me. They're going to give you 7-5, 6-6 every year, which ain't bad, but it don't warrant $20 million a year. Cause of Nick Saban when he left, they go back to mediocre. I think it is, but I think it was heading that way the last couple of years, and that's why he retired. Because Saban's not going to coach a team and go 8-4. He's just not. And I think he knows with the transfer portal stuff now in NIL that Tuscaloosa just doesn't have the backing. They don't have the fan base. They don't have the huge pockets like you see with Ohio State, Oregon, and Georgia, and USC. So I think he knows they're going to slowly but surely get less and less talent every year, and Saban's not going to coach an 8-4 football team. He's just not going to. Come back, Bluey. Glad to have you back when you come back. But Tennessee, if they can find an offense, they're going to be impossible to beat. They still have not given up more than 19 points in a game this year. I said 17 because it was 17 yesterday. But they have not given up more than 19 points in a game this year. But Arkansas, first half, you don't score. Florida, first half, you don't score. Bama, first half, you don't score. And the only thing keeping them in these games is their defense, which is funny because Josh Heupel's always been known as an offensive guy. Now his defense gets better, and the offense, well, it doesn't suck, but it's not what it usually is. But eventually, somewhere down the line, there's going to be a game where their defense is going to struggle. And if that happens, they're in trouble because you're not going to play a Georgia team coming up in a few weeks or Ole Miss team if they play Ole Miss and be behind at halftime 21-0 and come back and win. You're just not. Now, if you're behind 3-0 or 7-0, 10-0, that's an easy deficit. But if you're behind 3 or 4 scores, you can forget it. And for whatever reason, Tennessee's offense in the first half just it ain't there. They might as well just start the game at halftime because in the first half their offense don't show up. So if they have a game where their defense struggles, they're in trouble. But as long as their defense keeps these in these games, they're going to be tough to beat because as the game goes on, their offense gets better and better and better. They've just got to hope that their defense doesn't have a bad game. The offense is not executing the plays. I agree, and that's the problem, Eric, because I don't know what the problem is because they seem to be more conservative than they ever have been. I don't know if Heupel doesn't trust Nico or if he doesn't trust the offensive line, or it could be a combination of both because their offensive line looks good when they're run blocking, but pass blocking, their offensive line is atrocious. And if you have no confidence in your offensive line to pass block, you can't throw the ball. And the last few games, their offense looks like a offense under Jeremy Pruitt. When Pruitt was there, Pruitt just said, hey, run down the field, catch the ball. And that's pretty much what it is now. I mean, there's no design to it. It's just snap the ball, throw the ball. So I don't know if Heupel doesn't trust the offensive line or doesn't trust Nico, and it could be both. I personally think that Nico just cannot read a defense, so Heupel is scared to do a whole lot because he's scared that Nico will look up and have no idea what's coming because he cannot read a defense. Only game Tennessee got left that they will struggle against is Georgia. I think Tennessee wins out. They probably do. They've got past all their tough games because when the season started, we thought NC State was going to be good. They're not. We thought Oklahoma was going to be good. They're definitely not. So it looked like their three toughest games were going to be Oklahoma, Alabama, and Georgia in conference. And then the one out of conference game would be NC State. Turns out NC State sucks. Turns out Oklahoma sucks. So the only two real teams Tennessee played was Alabama and then coming up Georgia. But it looked tougher when the season started. But, you know, when the schedule comes out, you never know how good or bad somebody's going to be until the season starts. Oklahoma looked good on paper. They're awful. Coach Heupel won't let Nico run either because he's afraid to get him hurt. I think so too, but I also think it's because he don't trust the offensive line and doesn't trust Nico. Just watching some of the plays they run on offense, it looks to me like either Nico cannot read a defense or Heupel thinks he cannot read a defense. One of the two. And if that happens, you know, you're handcuffed on offense if you don't think your quarterback can read a defense, because any kind of time at all that requires a quarterback to look downfield, if you don't think he can do that, it eliminates every one of those plays. So all you can do is either hand the ball off or throw a quick screen pass, and that's it. Something that doesn't involve thinking, something that doesn't involve much looking down the field. Miami defeats Louisville 52-45. Miami continues to win, and their offense continues to look impressive, but their defense continues to be awful. And Louisville's not bad on offense, but they're not 45 points good. So at this rate, if I'm right with what I said back in August, and the conference championship game is Miami and Clemson, Clemson might score 70 because Miami's defense is absolutely pitiful. Miami is as bad on defense as Oklahoma and Michigan are on offense, and that's pretty bad. Arkansas State defeated South Mississippi, Southern Miss as they're known as, 44-28. LSU in a game that a lot of people thought would either be down to the wire or LSU might even lose. They dominate Arkansas 34-10. Y'all do have the running game, and I've mentioned a few times the last couple of weeks that right now Tennessee was all Dylan Sampson. If he had to miss a quarter or got hurt, they were in trouble because they could run the ball fine, but that's all they could do. And they're getting so far behind that eventually, if their defense has a bad game when it's halftime and you're down 21-0, then all of a sudden you no longer have Dylan Sampson because you're down too much, you're in trouble. You can't sleep nowadays. Well, that sucks. Snort, I feel bad for you, man. I don't get a lot of sleep, but thank God when I do, I sleep really, really good. But I won't talk about your uncle. I'm not going to bring your personal life here to the channel, but I hate to hear that. Bluey, I'm glad you are back. And then Georgia defeated Texas 30-15. I mentioned on the channel, maybe it was on Thursday or Wednesday one, I forget now when it was, that, you know, Texas, when I was talking about the game, looked like the better team because Georgia had been struggling coming out of the gate, and I even said if Georgia could come out and have a good first quarter, they could win the game, and that's exactly what happened. But for whatever reason, the last 3 or 4 games in the first quarter, Georgia looked absolutely pitiful. I mean, just awful. And, you know, when you play good teams like Alabama and Texas, you can't get really far behind into one or halftime and come back and win. But they had a good first quarter and they won. But all week long, I thought Texas would win. And I mentioned this at work on Friday. Somebody asked me who was going to win. I said, well, I thought Texas, but I have officially changed my mind. Now I'm going with Georgia because this past week, it didn't matter if it was radio, TV, magazines, YouTube, the internet websites. I mean, anybody that I heard make a prediction on that game, they picked Texas. And all my years of watching college football or any other major sport, almost every time there's a game where it's unanimous that one team is the better team and one team's going to win, it's always the opposite. So by Friday, when every single team picked Texas, I thought Georgia's going to win. And they had a good first quarter, and they won the game. I figured Georgia would beat Texas because Texas hasn't played really anyone up to that Georgia game. Texas has looked really, 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 really good. But you know, they had to go to their backup quarterback for 3 or 4 games right in the middle of the season, in which Manning is good, but he's only playing because he's a Manning. He's not great, but he's good. But Quinn Ewers is the better quarterback. But Texas had the same problem Georgia's had and Tennessee's had. They got behind big early. And when you play a top 5, top 10 team, you just can't get 3 or 4 scores behind and expect to come back. If you do, it's great. But when you make a habit of it, eventually it comes back to bite you. You had to feed your cat. Well, Bluey, I'm glad you fed your cat. Sorry if I missed the comments, but I'm trying to do a video and read comments at the same time. And Texas got behind early, and it's just too hard to get behind like that and come back and win, because then you're asking your defense to pretty much shut down the opposing team the rest of the game, and then you're asking your offense to pretty much score on every drive, and that's just too hard. So when you play top 5, top 10 teams, you get behind early, 9 times out of 10, you in trouble. 1 score is okay, 2 scores maybe. Anything more than 2 scores, it's almost an impossibility. Do it 1 time, great, but don't expect it after that. Quarterback competition after that Georgia game last night, I don't think so. I agree. I think Quinn's a better quarterback. Of course, on every football team in the history of mankind, the most popular player is always the backup quarterback. Anytime you struggle, change quarterbacks. Defense sucks, change quarterbacks. Miss a field goal, change quarterbacks. Bad call by the coach, change quarterbacks. It's always been that way, always will be. But for Texas, it's even worse because their backup quarterback is a Manning. But anybody that knows football should know that every coach on every team ever is always going to play the player that gives you the best chance to win. So I think if Steve Sarkisian thought that they had a better chance to win with Arch Manning, they'd be playing Arch Manning. And the fact that Arch Manning hasn't transferred somewhere else should tell you something. This day and time, all quarterbacks do if they ain't playing is transfer. So if Arch Manning thought he was so good and so ready, he'd have transferred. The fact that he hasn't should tell you all you got to know about Arch Manning as a regular quarterback. And then one of the games I was waiting to finish last night, Iowa State defeated Central Florida 38-35. Iowa State was in the top 10 when Saturday started, so I wanted to see how the game was going to end. And Central Florida pretty much led throughout the game. And it got late in the game, and I was trying to wait to the finish, and then I fell asleep. And then I got up and saw what happened, and I was like, man. But Iowa State scores with less than 1 minute to go in the game to defeat Central Florida 38-35. So Iowa State stays undefeated. The same Tennessee fans wanting Coach Heupel to sit Nico and start Gaston Moore, which I think is crazy. Gaston got in on one play when Nico went down, and Gaston threw an interception. Yeah, Gaston Moore's terrible. Any Tennessee fan that wants to play Gaston Moore is out of their mind. Even if Nico can't read a defense, even if Nico can't run the ball, a Nico at 45% is better than a Gaston Moore at 300%. Gaston Moore sucks. But I heard some Georgia fans this morning saying they want to bench Carson Beck because Carson Beck is struggling. Carson Beck, first of all, is not struggling. But second of all, Carson Beck is their best quarterback. But I don't know why it's always been that way on every team ever. Anytime their offense don't score on every possession, got to change quarterbacks. And I don't know why people do that. They should know by now that the coach is going to play the best quarterback. So if the starter is the starter, then he's the starter, for a reason. Hey, Marcus, I am fantastic. It's always a good day to have a good day. Any day above ground is a good day, in my opinion. These quarterbacks got to make a mistake every now and then. Yeah, they do, and it's kind of like a referee. You know, I do high school football for radio on Friday nights, and during the broadcast this past Friday night, we were talking about, the referees, because referees are like kickers. Kickers can go out and make 75 straight kicks, and nobody cares. Oh, they did their job. But you let that kicker that's made 75 straight kicks miss one kick, and it cost his team the game, he gets death threats. He's the worst kicker of all time. You just all of a sudden forget about the 75 he made and focus on that one that he missed. Referees, the same way. And football especially, but it's also in baseball and basketball. But in football, people act like they're not logical, and they act like they don't realize the referees have a job. And every time the refs throw a flag, they're the worst referees you've ever seen. Well, all they're doing is following the rule book. Or if they throw a flag, oh, they're out to get our team. No, they thought they saw a bad call. Just because the ref throws a flag doesn't mean he sucks. It doesn't mean he's out to get your team. It means, hey, he's human. He may have missed a call. He missed the call because he's human, not because he's out to get your team. But for some reason, people always think that. But if you watch this channel, Eric, you'll see I will never, ever, 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 ever blame any loss in any sport by any team on a referee. I won't do it. I'm sorry. I refuse to believe that one call decides a football game. You've got about 80 plays on offense, 80 plays on defense. You ain't going to convince me that out of 160 plays, don't matter, that one call changed the game. Nope, I don't believe it. I'm sorry. Do referees miss plays? Absolutely. Does it decide games? Nope, sure don't. That's what people say when they don't want to admit their team got beat. They want to blame it on the referees. I've always felt that way and always will feel that way. And Bama fans sure can't say anything, because when Nick Saban was there, every time there was a flag on the field, everybody always thought, well, Bama's getting favoritism. Bama's getting favoritism. So they sure can't say that now when they've supposedly been getting favoritism for the last 10 years. But I will never, ever, ever believe referees decide games. Don't believe it. Teams can have a bad call in the first quarter of a game and then lose the game and blame the game on that first quarter call. Nope, you had the second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter to make up for it. You didn't. That's on you. But that's what people do. People don't like to admit their team gets beat, so they always blame it on a player being hurt or the referee. No, you just got beat. That's what happens. Refs can't decide a game. They don't. I'm sorry, they don't. And you can't play a game without the refs. So even if they do miss a call, is the refs missing a call better, or is having the game forfeited because you had no referees the better thing? You have to have referees. If not, you can't play the game. So if people don't like the refs, you know what? Go to school to do it and be one yourself. But that's all I've got for today, so let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. My mom told me to use the word driver in a sentence. And I said, if I don't eat all my peas, it'll drive her crazy. And that does it for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of three. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.